All right. Hey, everyone. How you doing? It's Dr. Steve, and it is time once again for Executive Zen, the show that helps you lead consciously and profit responsibly. And I am coming to you right now from the ninth floor of the Hilton Bayfront in San Diego, where I'll be speaking tomorrow to the American Healthcare Association and National Council of Assisted Living about mindfulness and about controlling our minds and being more effective under stressful circumstances. So one of my favorite topics. Love talking to healthcare people, so this is going to be super fun. So today we've got a great guest I'll be introducing to you shortly. We're now 28 weeks into our show. This is one of the very first shows we're doing here on Facebook Live. I did want to show you who my companion is, so I'm actually going to unplug a couple things and just let you see that Woody's here with me. Hey, Woody, say hi to everybody. Woody's had a very tough day. It's been challenging getting here from Burlington, Vermont, but we've made it. We're here with you now, and we're super excited about it. And for those of you who've been watching or listening to the prior shows, you know that we love feedback. So please do, by all means, share your thoughts about the show with me and with Woody, and let us know how we can help you and how we can make this even better as days and weeks go on. So your input is absolutely invaluable to me. I try to keep this interactive, and so if you're going to pop up and say hi, I'm definitely going to be watching for you here as well. Today, we are going to be talking about employee engagement. How to get your employees fully engaged in the process of contributing to the outcome of your work. And you know, this is a problem that many employers have: is how do you get your people really involved? Get them really involved in participating in the work that's necessary and owning it, really owning it. I think that's the key to this. Is so often people go to work and they just sort of leave part of themselves behind. They do what they're told to do, but they don't really bring their full heart, soul, and spirit with them. And my guest today, who'll be joining me shortly, is an expert in this area, and I'll be introducing him at some length to you because this is a guy I really I like his work. I like the guy himself, and this is going to be a great conversation. I've had in my own personal work life, I've worked for myself for as long as I can remember. So I've never had to muster up the courage and the whatever it is that it takes to be an engaged employee, because I wasn't really an employee. But what I've noticed in hiring people over the years is that some people have a natural predilection for owning the job, right? They naturally have that ability to be engaged, to treat the work as if it's their own. And now when I go out and I talk to entrepreneurs, and I ask, how many people here in the audience, how many of you work for yourself? And the entrepreneurs raise their hands. The people who are not entrepreneurs typically don't raise their hands. They don't work for themselves as far as they're concerned. And the point that I'm always making whenever I speak to groups that are mixed, where there are entrepreneurs on hand as well as employees, is that you'll always succeed much more effectively if you treat the job as if you work for yourself. As if the work that you're doing matters personally to you, not to your boss, not so that you get a paycheck, but so that you truly, really bring your heart, soul, and spirit to the work that you're doing. And lo and behold, when you do that, the ownership that you take starts to have an impact on how you're treated by your employer, by the value of your work, by your sense of personal satisfaction, all sorts of other important indices of success. So whether you're working for yourself, you're working for someone else, or you happen to have employees, start engaging the idea that engagement starts with everyone treating the job as if it is their business. And I think that as we get into the part of the show where we get into conversation with my guest, that's going to be one of the things I want to talk to him about. I want to get his take on that. I always start my shows solo like this, and I give my preamble, or as I call it, my pre-ramble, and then I ask my guest once I've got him on board to set me straight. So if anything I've said has been completely ludicrous, he'll put us on the right path. So anyway, again, we're talking about employee engagement. I did want to mention before we bring our wonderful guest on that I've been running a little bit of a special that I wanted to offer you. And that is that, well, my book, Buddha in the Trenches, which I'm very proud of that book. It's about being at your best when things are at their worst, calm in chaos, bulletproof, happy for no reason, stress impervious. And the book has done very, very well. And about, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I was given the honor of being a guest on the Jenny McCarthy show. And when I went on Jenny's show, and we had a good time, by the way, it was a lot of fun. You should listen to that show. It's on my website. We have a clip of that on there. When I went on her show, one of the things we got to talking about was this idea of mindfulness and stress, and how mindfulness impacts stress. And then she gave me an opportunity to tell everybody about my book. So what I did was I offered a special. And the special was that if people went to my website and they put in the name Jenny, they would get access to a free couple of chapters in my book. And then if they decided they wanted the book, they could order it at that point at a discounted rate. So it was a special, and I did it for Jenny. And after I did it for Jenny, I thought, why not do it for you as well? So everyone who's a viewer here, a listener here, has access to that as well. And what you would do is just pretend like you just saw the Jenny McCarthy show. You'd go to stevetalbin.com/Jenny, Jenny, and that'll give you access to that page. And you'll be able to get the same benefits that her listeners got. So I encourage you to do that. Okay. Last thing I want to say before I introduce my guest is to remind you that this show is called Executive Zen. It's for leaders and aspiring leaders who want to lead consciously and profit responsibly. Hopefully you're one of them and are hoping to be a leader of some sort in your own right. And this is awesome, because this is a place where great conversations happen about that. So let me tell you about my guest today. Larry Friis is a speaker and an author and a consultant, and just a tremendous guy. Larry has an MBA and a nursing home administrator's license. He's also a doctoral candidate at Grand Canyon University, where his studies and dissertation focus on corporate leadership. He's an adjunct professor at Utah Valley University and Brigham Young University in Idaho. Larry is the principal of high-touch leadership, and in that capacity goes out and speaks and consults and teaches about high-touch leadership. And he's been doing this for some time. And he wrote a book relatively recently called Employees Are Customers Too. In fact, it's not even out in the stores yet. It will be out in, I think, a month or so. Larry's a veteran broadcaster as both a radio show host and a guest. He's an award-winning servant leader and community volunteer. Larry is married to Elizabeth. They're originally from Philadelphia and now live in Provo, Utah. Boy, those are two completely different places, where they're raising their granddaughter. And on a personal note, let me tell you that the reason I found Larry and the reason he's here with me is that he and I both shared the stage at, I believe, Larry, you'll have to tell me if I'm right about this, the Idaho Healthcare Association convention. And he got to see me speak. I got to see him speak. I think we impressed each other and we enjoyed each other's company. And we've decided that we both have messages that are compatible enough that it's worth having a conversation and doing it in front of all of you. So having said all that, let me introduce you to my friend, colleague, and nice guy, Larry Friis. Here comes Larry. Larry, how are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. And thank you so much for that introduction. I have to say that I've just been so excited since we met about a year and a half ago to be able to have some conversation back and forth with you and to be able to share some information. And I find that the things that you and I talk about are compatible with our messages. The things, they overlap, they align, they fit together. And it's a powerful 1-2 punch, because you talk about how to, manage the stress elements of business. And I think that's a key component of the things that I talk about, but you are so much better at sort of zeroing in on that, while I talk a little more broadly about some topics that really sort of cover, broad brush strokes with some specifics about leadership. And in listening to your preamble, there were two things that struck me about that. Can I keep rolling?
Yeah, and by the way, thanks for not calling it a pre-ramble, but go on.
Well, I thought about that, and thought, no, I'll keep it the right way, because I think that was great. There are two things. You talk about ownership, and ownership is so important because right now, if you look at a number of different surveys, one in particular sort of jumps out at me, and that is Gallup. Now, the Gallup poll has indicated that there is about 51% of employees across the United States that are probably less engaged in their work than they should be. And when you translate that into dollars, it's about $450 billion worth of lost productivity. That's a big number. And so the question becomes, how do we change that? And you spoke specifically of it, and that is this ownership issue. Now, managers, leaders, they look at this complexity in the workplace, and they manage based on somebody who is a Theory X employee or somebody who is a Theory Y employee.
You'll have to back up. I'm not going to make you do it right now, but you'll have to explain what that means.
Yeah, I'm going to. That's my next step.
Okay.
A Theory X employee is someone who comes to work, does his work, his or her work, collects a paycheck, does exactly what's expected, sometimes a little less, rarely ever more. Yeah. Whereas a Theory Y employee is somebody who owns the work, doesn't need a lot of motivation, understands exactly what it is that that person needs to do, and even goes beyond the work because they have figured out a way that within themselves they own that which they do. They like what they do. They want to do what they do. They'll go above and beyond the call of duty, and they don't need a lot of supervision. They have a high level of integrity, personal integrity. And so all of those things categorize them as Theory Y employees. As a result of that, managers manage to Theory X and to Theory Y. And as you can imagine, there is both in most organizations. And so what happens is leaders typically manage more toward Theory X than they do toward Theory Y. And that's why you have these motivation theories that come up, goal setting, reward systems, and those kinds of things. And that's an attempt to externally motivate people to own their job.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so the question is, why? Why do we do that? And here's even another question for you. Do these external forces change behavior over the long term?
Right. Yeah. So, okay, I just want to jump in for a second because this is dense and brilliant stuff. So first of all, I'm hearing you say the first thing that just got me was the sheer enormity of the problem. Right. Like you said, that 51% of people are not engaged, and the cost was unbelievable. And then this whole Theory X, Theory Y thing. What you're saying, if I'm understanding it, is that managers, by and large, are pointing at the Theory X people, the people who are just barely showing up doing what they're supposed to do, when they teach things like goal setting and give incentives and all of those kind of external or extrinsic motivators, right? That's where it's pointed at those people.
Right. And so,
in the hopes that those people will then become Theory Y people, or will at least do a little more than they've been doing all along. So you asked the question. And
let me ask you the next question now.
Yeah.
If we exact external pressure on you, will that change your behavior?
Over the long haul?
Well, that's the second half of the question. You're jumping ahead. You know too much.
Okay, go on. So,
yeah. So, but that's exactly right. Will it change your behavior? Yes. Will it sustain changed behavior? Which is the question that you just asked.
Right.
And the answer is no. I'll give you an example. When I was in the banking industry, I spent 23 years in the banking industry. And one of the things that would happen is that if a bank wanted to be able to get employees to work through a campaign period where they were selling a particular bank product. They would say, okay, we're going to do a 90-day blitz, and then we're going to have the people with the highest performance, you get a trip to Cancun, Mexico.
Right.
And so people run out there and they do all they can, and they make sure that they, work really hard, and people qualify for the trip, and, they do really good work, and it's typically work that extends beyond the normal course of work. And so they do that because there's this concerted effort for the 90-day period, because they have external rewards and pressures. The bank wants to be able to reach a particular goal. Managers are watching what you're doing. You're incentivized because you potentially go on a trip, and you don't want to be a person left in the dust, and so you don't dare not be a performer, right? And so as a result, you're going to change your behavior. You're going to do everything you can for that 90 days. What happens at the end of 90 days?
Right back to the way you were, I would imagine.
Exactly. There you go, right back to where you were before. And so was that external pressure a method of sustaining changed behavior over time?
Absolutely not.
And
unless you're going to keep on having one challenge after another, and then, but eventually I would imagine even that would kind of burn out, wouldn't it?
Well, it does, because people don't necessarily sustain themselves at this high level of intensity, over long periods of time. And as a result of that, you find that those folks then have a tendency to end up leaving because they're not theory Y people, they're theory X people. They perform at a certain level, they maintain that level, and they don't necessarily aspire to leadership or advancement or things like that. And so really the question then becomes, how do we manage people to become more theory Y-like, even if they're not necessarily theory Y people? What can we do to motivate them, to engage them, to help them have sustained changed behavior that brings their level of performance somewhere higher than what it is, and to a performance level that you would like to see? Because often, so that performance evaluations, they speak to somebody who performs below average, meets expectations, and exceeds expectations, or something like that, right?
Right, yeah.
And so you're always measuring people and what they do and how they do it. Well, we would love to have people that are always in the category of meets expectations or exceeds expectations. Exceeds expectations being the pinnacle and the place where you would love everybody to be, because then they're performing at high levels, and management responsibilities at that point in terms of day-to-day activity would be really focused on something else other than pressures to get them to perform. And so now the question becomes, how do we do that? What do we do? I mean, how does a manager, a leader, how does a CEO get somebody, or the organization as a whole, whether it is your tight circle in the executive management group, or if it's executive management's middle management group, or if it's middle management's day-to-day activity group of people, how do we get them to perform at another level? And there's a number of things that we can talk about. There's somewhat of an exhaustive list, but let's think about it in terms of a couple of things to be able to really hone in on that make a difference in people's work life. Now, I would ask you a couple of questions, and since you've hired people, I can ask you this question, because I think I heard you say in the beginning that you hire people. Is that correct?
Yes, not as much now, but there was a time in my life where, certainly in my days as a chiropractor.
Yes, chiropractor, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you, did you figure out, or did you have any perceptions of how it was that, or what caused people to perform at a little better level than others? Did you notice anything back in those days? Do you remember?
I think I was hit or miss. I think that, I always had this feeling, and you can tell me if this makes sense or not. that that the energy that the boss puts out has an impact on the employees, right? So that if I was energetic, if I was enthusiastic, if I was really kind of like the cheerleader, so to speak, not not just for the work, but just for the mission itself, that was somewhat contagious, sometimes, but not always.
Well, the energy level is certainly one thing because executives, they set a cultural tone for the organization. And that cultural tone is important. And the question becomes, what kind of culture do we want to set? I mean, if you think about, as case examples, Tyco or Enron, if I say those names and then you attach to it a corporate culture, would those corporate cultures be cultures that were nurturing, positive, innovative, full of integrity?
No, 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 and no.
Right. Those cultures didn't have that because at the top, I mean, especially with Tyco, I mean, you saw the CEO spending millions of dollars for birthday parties in the Bahamas for his children or wife. So there was monies that were funneled out of the organization to support this sort of lavish lifestyle. Enron was an organization that created financial statements that were false in order to be able to borrow monies, create new entities, and to be able to impress Wall Street so that they would have a buy as the recommendation for their stock and thereby have an ability to be able to attract investors and to be able to proliferate, the size and scope of the organization. Now, those are two examples of cultural organizations as led by the top that are not positive, experiences for most of their employees because things came crashing down around them. Conversely, when you have organizations that have strong corporate cultures with growth and innovation and leaders that evidence, employees and the need to be able to nurture those employees and to be able to give them certain authorities and capabilities at the lower levels, all of a sudden you have a different culture because people are trusted. People are given opportunities to be able to contribute through innovation and other suggestions. Leaders down the chain are given authorities within the organization. And so all of a sudden we see that what is happening at the top filters into the other echelons of the organization. And the culture is one that people feel proud to be a part of and that they like, and they want to, see, longer term relationships in there. And so the overall cultural tone is one important way to be able to engage employees. But that's something that happens at an organizational level. Now, what happens between the leader and the employee? Let's talk about that for a moment, because you spoke about the energy level that you had. What about the relationships that you have with individuals? Did that make any difference if you remember back to those days of being the chiropractor?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't think I ever, unless I was under a lot of stress and wasn't really behaving at my highest and best, my paradigm, my mission, my way of being was not authoritative so much as collaborative, right? So, I mean, these people that were working with me, I treated them as partners, not as subordinates. I'd say please and thank you. If I saw that they were running into difficulties, I'd sort of sit down with them and kind of work together through things. So yeah, I don't think that.
You're explaining something. Can you put a word on what you are explaining? Because there's a word for what you have just described.
I think I used the word collaborative, but I don't know if that's the word you're looking for.
And collaboration is critically important because it's true. Yeah. I mean, what you were is that you were more of a mentor to those people. because there's always the issue of there has to be a boss and there's always somebody else, right? So it's a leader-follower relationship. That's how it's couched. But the new leadership is really about being a mentor. And you described that. Being a mentor is important because it does exactly the things that you're talking about. A mentor is one that nourishes a relationship. There's still a line because there has to be, right?
Right.
The individual who is the leader has responsibility and is held accountable to the issues of leadership and performance of that part of the organization. And so there's always going to be a line, because that line necessarily also, there's a difference in pay scale, typically skills, reporting responsibilities, and other things like that. Now, note that doesn't even have to be spoken because it's known in the organization, right? I mean, you don't have to say that because I sit in the corner office, I'm the boss, and so therefore you have to come to Mecca to have the conversation, right?
Well, you remember Cialdini talked about being in authority versus an authority.
Right, right.
So the whole idea, I'm in authority, I've got the big office, and you've got to count on me. That doesn't work. At least it never worked for me. Anyway.
Right.
But an authority, as in, I know something that maybe I could teach you that you could then know. I've got knowledge and skill in this area, and I'm going to be kind in transmitting it. That's kind of about it.
Right. And so I term that power over versus power with.
Okay.
Okay, it's the same thing in a little bit of a different version. And I can always exercise power over people, but why would I do that? Why wouldn't I exercise power with people? And that's what mentoring does. It allows people to have a collaborative relationship with you. It allows people to have constructive feedback, both to and from you. In other words, you necessarily need to be able to give constructive direction and understanding. And they likewise should be able to do the same with you without reprisal. Because if a reprisal is exacted toward people, then that's exercising power over. Now, I would not say that you never do that, because there's always, in some parts of relationships, there's the need for what I call education tools. And education tools is a little different, but it's a nicer way of saying disciplinary tools, right? We educate them to the right behaviors. We educate them to the right standards. We educate them to the right the right methods or processes, right? That's what mentoring does. It's an education process. It's a free flow of communication without reprisal. It's the ability to be able to trust this employee with thoughts and ideas and contribution and with innovation. And all of a sudden, if we're doing that, we have a completely different level now of engagement. Now what I'm doing is I'm giving somebody an opportunity to be able to really understand what the whole picture is about and how this individual and then the collective group that the individual may be in, and how they all contribute to the whole. And if I give them those particular benefits of understanding, all of a sudden the light bulb goes on. Hey, I know where I fit. I know why I fit. I know how I fit. And I know that in my contribution, I can make something better or worse. And guess what? I have a relationship with my leader, mentor. And as a result, this is a completely different place to work. This isn't what I was used to over there at that other place where here's my assignment, here's my responsibility, go to it, and I'll check in with you maybe once or twice a month, or I'll see you in the hallway. Hey, how's it going? What's going on? You know what I mean? This is a completely different level of understanding, because now all of a sudden what we're doing is we're giving people this opportunity to be able to have interaction, to be trusted, and we as leaders then are present in their work life, and that necessarily spills over into other personal information that you're going to have.
Okay. Can I stop you?
Yes.
Because there's so many things you're saying are really sparking my thoughts. First of all, you just talked about the leader being present. And of course, that's in my mind, and certainly that's kind of my my area of specialty is helping people to be more present, because most people aren't very present.
Right. It's a big part of what I write in my book.
Okay. So people are preoccupied, they've got biases, they've got secret irritations, undelivered communication, and so they're not really fully present when you're with them. You're not necessarily with them. And that same person who's not really present would then observe the behavior of a subordinate and interpret that behavior as being a quality of that subordinate versus a reaction to the employer not being present. That makes sense? Like, if I'm really present, I mean, I'm not going to run into the same kind of problems if I'm if I'm open, if my mind is open, if I'm like looking you in the eye and treating you with love and respect. And if you're challenged, like helping to work through it. So I guess the question that's been kind of percolating for me, though, is does this work for everybody or most people? In other words, are there people who are just plain old theory X, and no matter how empowered you are or empowered you allow them to be, they're just going to take advantage of this or just do the least possible amount? Or is it more the latter? Is it more that most people, when treated a certain way and in a climate and a culture where there's respect and mentorship, that those theory X people mostly will start to step up to the plate? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, well, let me offer a couple of examples and then I'll answer your question. Can I do that?
Sure.
So I had a bank president who is a great example of this issue, and he's the reason for which I talk about being present. And so what he used to do, well, first of all, you can imagine a bank president, very busy, has the bank, carrying the bank on their shoulders and responsible for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, and, always having meetings and things to do, people to see, places to go, the whole thing. Very busy individuals. I don't care who you are. If you're running a bank, the fact of the matter is you are extremely obligated. Well, the one thing that was really good about this guy was that he would walk through the bank 3 times a week at a minimum. Sometimes there was a stretch when he would walk through daily, and he would say hello to people. He wouldn't spend a lot of time, but just enough time. Say hello to people, ask one question, and kind of move on to the next one and keep going, right? And so in that way, he was present because he showed that the people who were running the bank, doing all their various responsibilities, the branch deposits, operations people, lenders, janitors, you name it, they were all important because they all had a role to play. And he made you feel that way because he took the time for 1.5 minutes or less to say, "Hey, Larry, how are you doing? What happened in that baseball game last night?" And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, how did you know about that, right? And so he was present in not only the bank, but in a little piece of my life because he took a moment to ask the question. So I actually learned something about that, and that is that this particular leadership style was one that garnered a high level of loyalty to this particular bank president. And when you get loyalty, what do you get in addition to that?
I've got to imagine people are going to work harder for, and they want to, it's a reciprocity thing. You're treating me well with respect. I want to do the same for you.
Well, here's what you get. You get increased productivity.
Yeah.
You get higher levels of engagement. You get higher volunteerism and more sacrifice for the organization. So you get 4 things out of being present as the leader. And where do you see those kinds of results? Anywhere. You just don't see them. So when people take the time to be that mentor and to be present with other people in the organization, it absolutely changes the internal motivation, and it changes external pressures. And that's the key, Steve, that we're talking about. How it is that we can move people internally so that we can have long-term changed behavior, so that we can get them to be more productive, more engaged, more sacrificial, more loyal, and willing to volunteer more often. It's a great goal to be able to get to, and it can be achieved by some of these little things that we talk about. And so I think that answers your question. Now, here's the other half of it. Remember that everybody, I mean, you and I, we share the human experience. The human experience is about some of those psychological needs that Maslow talks about and all that kind of stuff, right? But there's another theorist, his name is McClellan, and McClellan talks about the 3 human needs in a work environment, and it is the need to affiliate with others, the need to have power, and the need for contribution. And so those 3 things are really important. When you give people affiliation, you do that through being present, by being a mentor, or being what I call a developmental leader, which I'll talk about in a little bit because it's another form of internal motivation. And this is where we're going now with the conversation, is how we flip external motivations into internal motivations. And it's those internal motivations that we're trying to get to through mentorship, being present, and being a developmental leader. So those things are important. This is this affiliation thing. We've got to find a way to affiliate people to our organization so that they will do those other things that we spoke about. The second thing is power. Everybody wants some level of power, and power can come just merely by having a relationship with you as my boss, Steve. You know, if you're going to be my boss, then I'm going to have a relationship with you that makes me feel good. I have a sense of power because I've got your ear, right? I have the ability to get you to listen to me, and so therefore I hold a little bit of power. Okay. Well, that's one way to be able to give them power, and that doesn't hurt anything because we haven't changed the dynamic of the organization. But right. We've given them freedom to come in and sit down and talk with me as the boss, right? And so there's a power piece. And then the last one is contribution. And everybody in the human experience wants to be able to say, I've made a contribution, whether that's you as a speaker at AHCA, me as a consultant to the banking industry, or the person at work who has advanced an idea that may be able to save some money in the organization. It's about contribution. So, and now the question, so I think that answers the second half of your question. The human experience is that we all want those things, and so will it change all of us? Well, it'll change all of us to some degree or another. Will everybody be a Theory Y person? No, never proven to be the case. Okay. But they get closer to being more productive, more engaged, more willing to volunteer and to contribute, etc. And that's what we want. We want those sustained, changed behaviors because that's important to the organization as a whole. So does that answer your question?
It does. So McClellan talked about the 3 needs being affiliation, power, and contribution. And that when and you're defining affiliation as being like being able to affiliate with your boss, affiliate with leadership.
Yeah, it's either it's with the boss and with the organization. I mean, there has to be a connection to both the boss and the organization. And
so more kind of team play, that sort of thing, people working together with one another.
That's part of the reason for which people have logos and why they have brands and why they
Oh,
have
okay.
signage and things like that. That's a part of affiliate. I
Okay, yeah,
attach
I'm affiliated with this. I'm part of something bigger than myself.
right, bigger than me, right?
Okay, got it. Oh, that's awesome. And then power, and you defined, you were talking about power. One element of power is being able to like have the boss's ear. That's a form of power. And and I think empowering people to maybe be able to make certain decisions sometimes, not have
Yeah.
to run to somebody else to make a decision.
Yeah,
And
if you can push authorities down to the front level,
yeah,
then what you have is an ability for people to be able to feel a sense of empowerment and to be able to make changes. There's a perfect organization that does this pretty well. It's the Ritz-Carlton. The
okay,
Ritz-Carlton pushes down to the frontline level the ability for associates to be able to make as much as a $2,500 correction decision change
yeah,
without having to go to another authority. And if you think about it, if a customer is having an issue, let's take you as an example. You had a long day today. You left from Vermont, you're on the West Coast now, you had travel, you had to go through airports, you had waiting time. So you get to the hotel and you're like exhausted and you're like, oh man, I got to take Woody for a walk and I still have to get up to the hotel and somebody notices that you're having that experience, right? Well, maybe this guy, this girl, this person at the Ritz-Carlton where you're staying says, you know what, that guy needs, I don't know, he needs a pizza and he needs, a drink or something. And, let's send something fresh up into the room and just get him feeling comfortable. And maybe we can even have some concierge service. And it'll cost me, I don't know, $100 to make him feel comfortable and good. Well, that's within his $2,500 authority, and it makes him, feel as if he's doing something to create a really good guest experience. And then guess what? What's the likelihood of your review just increasing a notch or two when you think about your overall experience at the hotel?
oh, totally. I mean, when you said, I mean, I got chills thinking about it. It's like, boy, if that ever happened, I mean, I'd be like a lifelong customer of that organization. And contrast what you're saying, this whole thing, with what you see so often, which is people who are so unempowered that they don't even care. So you tell them about something that's like a heinous thing that's happened, and they're like, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't do anything about that."
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, exactly. And if you think about it, true customer service is about trying to find a way to be able to bring that person into the store, the organization, the entity that you're at,
yeah,
to engage them with a conversation, to give them the information that they need, to provide them with a good transactional experience, and to help them feel satisfied with the overall experience while they are there, and to send them off as somebody who you believe you gave a good experience and that they would come back, right? I mean, that's the goal. It's the seamless transitions between various points of contact and or a transaction, and that goes across all organizations. I don't care what kind of organization you are, because ultimately everybody's lifeline is the customer. And this is where I come back and talk about it in my book, which is titled Great Companies Know. Employees are customers too. And that's this issue of that we're talking about today, is trying to put everybody in a context of being a customer. Because if you can advance that culture in your organization, then what you've done is you have just increased the customer experience, because your employees are a reflection of what's going on in your organization. Just like I explained in the Ritz-Carlton model, if I gave the employee the ability to be able to see that you had a stressful day and do something really simple and inexpensive to be able to make you feel better, then all of a sudden I've increased the probability of retaining you as a customer at least one more time. right?
Well, and what I'm hearing in that, it's like the rewards exist at every level. So it's certainly me as a customer in that scenario, the rewards are off the charts. I mean, I'm feeling great about this company for having done, for the personal touch, for somebody being personal and caring enough to do that. Of course, I'm going to refer a ton because, it's like, I remember I heard this, but satisfied customers don't refer, enthusiastic customers refer.
There you go.
That's to create enthusiasm. So for me as the buyer, yeah, but also for the employee who has been empowered to do that. I mean, how great does it feel to be able to make somebody's day? And if I know that it's within my power at work to make somebody's day, that's a job I want to keep. That's a job that I want to stay engaged in. So yeah, so that's the power piece of this, and it's also sort of the contribution piece. It's like I'm making a contribution to this company, making a contribution to the employees. Powerful stuff.
Well, and it's really simple because it doesn't take a lot to be able to implement these kinds of changes. And frankly, Steve, we haven't even talked anywhere close to the number of other thoughts and ideas that we can, engage in this conversation in order to be able to take it even a step further. But the importance of this is this sort of overarching discussion of finding a way to be able to create a good employee experience in order to be able to give your organization a boost in productivity. And in the end, that's what we're looking to do in order to be able to, or let's say it this way, to decrease, that 51% disengagement that we talked about at the very beginning of the program based on that Gallup poll. And then to be able to reduce that $450 billion of lost productivity in the U.S. economy. I mean, think about if you just make small changes in your respective organizations as you listen to this program and do just some of these little key things that we talk about, you can find a completely different level of motivation by your employees. And what we're trying to get to is this issue of internal motivations. And internal motivations come through changing the human experience that you have at work. And those changes obviously come as a result of empowerment, mentoring, relationships with a boss, being present in the relationship. And now I'm going to talk about the last piece of it because I think we'll end up running out of time before the program's over. But if we have time to hit some other ones, we will certainly do that. But it's this difference, what I term being a developmental leader. The developmental leader, that's a leadership theory that's out there. I mean, it's been written about a lot. And there's a difference between supportive and developmental leaders. This is sort of couched within the framework of being a transformational leader. So if I were to diagram it, it would be transformational leadership at the top with two subcategories, one supportive leadership and the other one developmental leadership. I want to focus specifically on developmental leadership because developmental leadership is another form of creating internal motivation for employees and bringing people from theory X over to theory Y. And what this is the time that it takes for a leader to be able to identify people in the organization and say, hey, listen, we see that they have opportunities, potential, and that they could be people that could grow into something of greater significance within the organization. And do those people reflect the fact that they want and are interested in the organization? Because on their own, they may have gone out and gotten an achievement, a certification, a new skill level that they've obtained, or something that evidences that they're trying to be a better employee. So they bring some value with them. Well, when you look at that, it's then maybe an opportunity to identify those people as people that you would take the time to develop, not
Right.
just support, but develop. And so what does that mean? It means that you literally sit down with them and you think with them through a career path and what it is that they could potentially do in this organization. And then you set milestones of achievement through the course of each step until they get to step 1 advancement, step 2 advancement, step 3 advancement. And your responsibility as the mentor, developmental leader, is that you take an interest in this individual and that you literally hold them accountable for their progress. Because now what I've done is I've deepened the relationship, I've empowered them with a career opportunity, and given them the ability to be able to move from point A to point D. And I'll give you an example of this. You know, I was running a nursing home a number of years ago. And one of the things that I tried to create in the culture of the organization was that we would hire people from within without getting incestuous, meaning that you always had to bring some outside blood in for sort of refreshing purposes. But nevertheless, we created a culture of expectation and growth within the organization. And one of the things that happened was that I had a housekeeper who wanted to get out of being in the housekeeping game and wanted to enhance her career. So she came to me and said, hey, if opportunities exist, do me a favor, consider me. I don't just want to be a housekeeper for the rest of my life. And I said, good to know. Thank you for telling me. Well, activities director position came open, and I thought, this might be an interesting fit. Most of the people in the organization said, we don't like that. We don't think she's a good fit. Well, the interesting thing about it was that I had a private conversation with her, and she came to me and said, look, I see not only that that's an opportunity for me, but I also see that if I get certification level number 1 and then certification level number 2, I can save money for the organization by getting rid of the outside consultant that has to come in and sign off on all of my activity sheets. I can sign it myself, and I can save the organization money. And I thought, this person's engaged, this person has a vision, this person can see that they can save me money. Guess what?
Let's develop them. Let's develop them.
That's exactly what we did.
I'll direct us back to a couple of things. This has been we'll have to have you back to talk more about this. I have a specific question for you. The goal that we've been talking about is the goal of engaging employees through internal motivators versus external motivators. And that some of the tools to do that are empowering employees, developing relationships with employees, taking a little bit of time with them, using these developmental models to identify people who might want to go further, and like being a coach and a mentor for those people in particular. None of this stuff is brand new. So what are the obstacles? That's what my question is. Why aren't more leaders? What's in the way? So if you may be listening to this show and you're thinking, this is great, but I want to know what's the but? What's the thing that might interrupt somebody's willingness to take this? And you only have 2 minutes to answer the question.
Well, it's always the difficulty of the fiduciary responsibility of the organization.
Okay.
People are always looking for corporate efficiencies under maximum responsibility with limited funds. But I would say that is changing in today's environment because the economy is stronger. There is growth in organizations. They're looking for people that are going to be innovative and engaged. They're no longer really looking to ask people to do more for less. And so now is an opportunity to be able to, and this is part of what has to happen, because because the economy is expanding, people will leave at the drop of a hat. And so One of the things that you have to do is you've got to engage these people, you have to develop them, and you have to empower them. And these are the ways to be able to do that and to protect against people leaving. In other words, this is an increase in retention of your employees in a time of economic expansion when they can leave at the drop of a hat. So these things are important for those reasons.
Okay, so what you're saying, and if I'm understanding, because I'm asking what's the obstacle to people not doing that, it sounds like maybe it's just a lack of knowledge. Maybe they don't realize how valuable this approach is. that if any sane human being listening to what you're saying should come to the same conclusion, which is that these aren't even really expensive fixes. It's like spend a few minutes, be more present. These are not difficult things to do. I can only imagine that if people aren't doing them, it's because they don't realize how valuable these things can be.
Well, it's true. And people often are saying, look, I'm so busy day to day doing what I'm doing that I don't have time to do more, with these people and to be more present and to be more of a mentor. And that's absolutely the opposite logic that makes sense if you want to increase productivity, volunteerism, innovation, and contribution.
Beautiful. All right, listen, Larry, I'm so thrilled that you're on here because this is a tremendous conversation. Let me say a few parting words to my guests, and then I want to ask you to stick around and answer, and offer a challenge for the week. So, for those of you who are with us right now, this is Executive Zen. We're here to support you in leading consciously and profiting responsibly. I think this show's done a great job of that. In a few minutes, we're going to wrap up, and Larry and I are going to give you a few parting thoughts as you go forward in your week. First, I do want to invite you to head over to stevetaubman.com /Jenny, if you remember, and claim your free sample of Buddha in the Trenches. And of course, if you've enjoyed the show, please share your comments either on iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever you are listening to this, or send your comments right to me at stevetaubman@gmail.com. We'd love to get your input. If you've got some topics you'd like us to take on in future shows, we're very happy to talk to you about that. And of course, if you'd like to learn how to bring me into your company to create a mindful, holistic organization of fearless leaders, contact me through stevetaubman.com. And if you want to know more about Larry and the work he does, his website is hightouchleadership.com, hightouchleadership.com. And I highly encourage you to check out his work. He's great in front of a room, and he's, as you can hear, very methodical about this material. So we end our shows with a metaphor, a quote, and a challenge for the week. And the metaphor for this week, I was thinking about the game of ping pong. I kind of feel like when you play ping pong, you can't do it by yourself, right? If you hit the ball, somebody else could hit it back. So think about, as long as you keep playing as a leader, then other people keep playing. If you're playing ping pong, you've got to be very present. You've got to be watching where the ball is going. You've got to be in partnership with others in order to play the game. So think of this week like ping pong. See how that plays out for you. The quote for the week is from Stephen Covey, who said, "Always treat your employees exactly as you want them to treat your best customers." And I didn't know when I selected that quote just how germane it would be from the conversation we've had with Larry today. And Larry, what I'd love for you to do right now is to take a moment and share a challenge to our guests for the week.
My challenge would be present with your employees. Find a way to ask every employee at least 3 times this week one question about their personal life. Not only their work life, but their personal life. Hey, how was Jimmy's baseball game? Or how was the dance recital? Or how was dinner Friday night? Tell me a little bit about that. And begin to break through some of just the work relationship and be present not only at work, but in their lives.
Love it. Everybody needs to be recognized, appreciated, and acknowledged. And that's a great way to do it. When we return next week, my guest will be a president of the American Institute of Stress, Heidi Hanna, a great friend and a brilliant woman. Remember to tune in next week and share this with your friends. Subscribe to the podcast. Visit iTunes, iHeart, wherever you go. Find my channel, Executive Zen. I am Dr. Steve Taubman. Have a great week, and remember to lead consciously and profit responsibly. Take care. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Steve.